Hi, I'm Ryan with Team CUSI, and today we're here to talk to you about how teams face challenges that occur when they're rolling out technology at multiple sites across the country. Step 1, gather the prerequisites. Step 2, get a handle on the hardware. Step 3, standardize the workflows. Step 4, get the staffing right. Step 5, the project pre-kickoff. Step 6, let's roll out. Step 7, the after-action review. Failing to define goals and whose role is, what everyone's role is in helping reach those goals is key. It's just like anything in life. People need to know what the expectations are of them individually and how that affects the overall outcome. Making sure that whether it's a project manager, a project coordinator, a field technician, or somebody at the retail or store level knows how they're going to help drive a project to the finish line is really key in making sure what the deliverables are from their perspective and from their role is really something that's going to help guarantee success. So making sure everyone knows what their role is and how their role impacts a project, and if they don't execute their project, they should understand that as well. So really laying out a plan, whether it's a scope of work, and then going stage by stage through that scope of work and making sure everyone knows where they play into that scope of work, I think that's really important. And then creating a run book that is defined and edited throughout a piloting phase is also really key. Taking a scope of work and putting it next to a run book and making sure that each person knows where they're coming into play, how they're supposed to deliver that, and what the expectations of their partners and peers are, I think is really, really important. I mean, the wrong hardware selection could be crippling financially, functionally, operationally. Everything that you're adding new hardware, you're updating hardware, you're refreshing hardware or technology to address a problem or address a challenge. COVID is a great example of that. People were modifying their drive-throughs at rapid pace to deal with more throughput and flow there. If you didn't create pick a hardware solution or pick a technology that helped service your individual needs, that's going to create more challenges and potentially create more bottlenecks and take money out of your pockets. So you implement technology and hardware to basically create more efficiencies and effectiveness and ultimately create a better work experience for your teammates and also create more enjoyable transactional experience for your consumers. So making sure you pick that hardware and understanding how a process works, pitting hardware up against each other at a piloting and a field trial phase is really important, and making sure that's the best in class for your individual solution. It could be a point of sales that is in every other retail location or every QSR across the board, but those applications may not be what's best for you as a restaurateur or as a retailer. So you really need to evaluate that. Taking best in class advice from trusted partners is also key, and seeing what they see out there and making sure that it's just not another transactional relationship. Defining people's roles and making sure they understand those roles is really key. You talk about a workflow from the top level of an executive to down through the IT team to the construction team. Making sure that everybody knows what the expectations are early on is key. Making sure that everyone knows what the ultimate goal is and what problem they're solving. I think that'll help get people championing a new rollout project across all the different sites that it is touching. So basically creating a workflow that everyone knows their roles, everyone knows how to communicate those roles, and to know where each benchmark comes into play and how to adjust and adapt to challenges and variables that are unforeseen and unpredictable will also become part of those workflows. So creating an agile team internally, externally, and people working together, I think that is key. So that all comes down to communication. So you simplify that in a lot of ways where you have leads in each level of a project. At a technical level, if you have a team of 5 going out to deploy a technology, you have one lead for that technology team that is the point of contact as they go upstream. And that person talks to a project coordinator who talks to a project manager. And they're communicating directly with the end user, whether it's a QSR or a retailer. They're making sure that they understand a project soup to nuts and where things are going and how things are flowing. If a project gets behind, that could be detrimental to operational dollars and getting live. So the ultimate goal is to define a project's ultimate goal, which would be deploying a technology across every site in the country. How are you going to get that done by that desired date? And what's the most efficient and effective way to do it? And communication is what it's all about. And making sure all the key players and everybody that has a role or is a key stakeholder in those projects understands their impact on that project. And it could be on an individual site, during a piloting phase, but that's building a foundation and creating a workflow for the entire project that is replicable through an entire state, through an entire region, and across the country. Making sure the people in the right seats on a project is key from the onset. Making sure the right project leads are communicating, from the top down. So it's where you're putting people in a position to succeed is really, really important. We find that, a project manager has a lot of control over these projects, but, they have to have trust in the people they're working with and understand each person's, strengths and weaknesses. And making sure that you put people in the right seat will help you propel projects forward. So, understanding internally and externally what each person's role is and how that role will impact a project is really important. I think that and understanding truly how the two parties will work together, internal parties, external parties, and creating that communication cadence that is consistent and replicable is something that it goes a long way. And it seems really simple when you think, hey, I'll do this a couple of times and it'll be easy to implement. It's not always that case, but that muscle memory is really key. It's like anything in sports or music or whatever your passions are. It's the more you practice, the more you do something, the easier it becomes, and you continue to kind of just be able to do it. So doing that over and over again and creating that cadence and understanding how you continue to deliver projects is key. And I think the more comfortable you get with somebody, we have partners that we work with across the board, and we do thousands of sites with a year. And our project managers are used to working with their leadership and their project managers, and there's a cadence where we're almost an extension of their team, and I think they're comfortable with us and they trust in us to deliver those projects. And the same thing is we know they're going to hold up their end of the bargain because it is a joint effort by everybody involved. And if you're not all on the same page and there's not constant alignment, you're going to get off track easily and things can spiral quickly. I think that anybody that's ever worked in this field has seen it in the past and has lived through those challenging projects. And when you go back to it, sometimes it's just simple. And it's just, an easy pivot and an easy change in how often you're communicating, or, hey, we're going to do this to address this. And being comfortable and confident enough in your relationship, it's kind of like any kind of personal relationship. You have to be able to talk transparently and fluidly with your partners to make sure that they understand what the expectation is, and feel confident in when you say something that there's not going to be backlash, and it's just creating a strong relationship, and it'll help propel projects forward. Misalignment and not defining what the ultimate goal is key. Someone might say that we see this all the time, the deadline date is the most important function or the most important hurdle we need to overcome, but they're not understanding that, hey, we haven't implemented this across the board yet, so when we get in real time, that the actual functional part of it is actually much more challenging to implement than you would think it would be. So, defining the goals and what the most important goals and which carry the most weight is really important early on in the project. And is it a deliverable date? Is it the most, we always tell people the cheapest route is not always the best route. And just because someone's a low bidder, you're going to deal with, other issues that come with low pricing. And, it's great to be able to pass on savings and be a great partner. And we pride ourselves on that. But we also want to make sure that those expectations are defined early on, and that they can understand that. We hate to, change orders is a dirty word here at CUSI, and we know that our partners think that's a dirty word too, because there's unforeseen cost, and things happen. But as you start to go through piloting phases and understand what a project is, you need to work to make sure that you guys are defining those goals and readjusting and defining the benchmarks throughout a project, to make sure that everyone has buy-in and all the stakeholders are committed to delivering what the goal is, and it's communicated. I think it's just like in sports. People script things out and make sure that. I hate to use the football analogy, but a lot of teams script out their first 10 plays of a project or a football game, and you need to do that in a delivery for a project as well. And if you start to orchestrate things and you create a run book that is accurate and it defines every step along the way, it makes it really hard to get out of line, and it helps it to create consistency and replicable processes. And that's how you create that standardization that is so important to everybody. As people, and we've seen it over and over again, companies acquire companies and the IT team or the tech team doesn't know what they're looking at remotely. It's because that standardization hasn't been done, and the deliverables haven't been consistent across the board. So it starts at the ground level. It's the X's and O's and the grassroots effort to really make sure as you're delivering a project, you're defining things step by step, so the projects are being implemented the same way, so that once they're implemented, they're actually integrated the same way and they look consistent and standardized across every location. So that helps project managers internally for restaurants and retailers truly understand the value of standardization, and it helps make their day-to-day easier, which maybe they're working a regular 8 to 5 instead of working extra hours to try to make sure they're troubleshooting things. So understanding, hey, these little things that don't seem that big of a deal, if a cable gets punched into the wrong port or whatever it happens to be during a implementation, that is a big deal, because our partners and people that work in IT departments across the country, they rely on that to be there and be consistent across the board. It's always really good to review projects internally, externally, collaboratively. Obviously, we enjoy working with our partners, and we value their input because we consistently want to get better and strive for excellence. And you're always going to learn things on every single project, and overcoming obstacles holistically and as a partnership is really key. And we experienced this, so we pivoted this way, and this variable caused us to do this. That makes everybody better. And as you start to grow collectively and overcome obstacles as a team, whether it's with yourself internally or with an external partner, I think that builds cohesion and creates those standardized process and the relationship as well. So after action report, you understand what the expectations are, what your expectations are, what your partner's expectations are, and then how you're going to approach the next challenge or project together. And I think it allows you to speak freely and say, hey, we overcame this together, and celebrate the wins as well. It's easy to get hung up on things that go wrong and go sideways, but ultimately you're going to overcome them. And whether you're going to overcome them once or create repeatable problems, that's something that's up to you and up to your relationship and how those things are defined. So we always find it very important to have those after action reviews, to constantly be in communication. How can we improve? How can processes can improve? And our partners and some of our best partners are constantly asking us, hey, challenge us, push on us to say, hey, how can we communicate more efficiently and effective with you? And as we create those communication protocols and standards, we find that very helpful to consistently do those after action reviews and continue to evolve and define our processes and become better.